Her son froze her bank accounts, calling it protection. Maggie Lorne, retired nurse and widow, didn't panic. By nightfall, she'd filed an injunction, hired a lawyer, and reopened every account he'd tried to steal. He thought he could declare her unfit. She proved him unbreakable. And when he reached for her money again, the court would already have her answer signed, sealed, and waiting. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The rain had started before dawn, that thin Oregon kind that never really stops. By the time Maggie Lorne reached the glass doors of Salem Community Bank, her raincoat was beaded with mist, and her umbrella dripped steadily onto the entry mat. She'd come early to avoid the Friday crowd. Just a simple transfer. Nothing more. Inside, the place smelled faintly of coffee and printer toner. The line was short, the hum of small-town routine comfortingly predictable. Maggie smiled at the teller she'd known for years, then slid her bank card across the counter. "I'd like to move some funds from my savings into checking," she said. The teller typed, frowned, typed again. "One moment, Mrs. Lorne, I'll get Tina." Something in the girl's tone, too careful, too measured, made Maggie's stomach tighten. She watched the teller hurry off toward the manager's office. Behind the glass wall, Tina Green glanced up from her desk, expression shifting in that practiced, professional way that meant something wasn't right. When Tina came out, she wasn't carrying her usual clipboard. "Morning, Maggie. Can we talk in my office for a second?" Maggie followed, her shoes squeaking faintly on the tile. The office was warm, the blinds half drawn against the drizzle. Tina gestured for her to sit, then shut the door with a click that sounded too final. "I'm afraid there's been a development," Tina began carefully. "Your account access is temporarily restricted." "Restricted?" Maggie repeated. "On whose authority?" Tina hesitated. "Your son's." Maggie blinked. "Caleb?" Tina nodded, sliding a folder across the desk. Inside was a notarized packet with the heavy stamp of the county clerk. Maggie read the first line slowly, her breath catching halfway through. Petition for temporary guardianship. Allegation of mental incapacity. The words seemed to shrink and expand all at once, like her vision couldn't decide whether to blur or sharpen. She turned another page. Caleb's signature, neat and deliberate, sat beneath the accusation. "He submitted this to our compliance department 3 days ago," Tina said gently. "Until it's resolved, the bank has to freeze activity for your protection." Maggie set the papers down. Her fingers didn't shake, but the muscles in her jaw clenched so tight she could hear her pulse. "For my protection," she repeated. "That's what he called it." Tina's voice softened. "I can't give legal advice, but you might want to speak to someone. An attorney, maybe?" Maggie met her eyes. "I know exactly who." The clock on the wall ticked too loudly. Somewhere out front, a customer laughed. Normal life, continuing without her. Maggie gathered the papers, slid them into her purse, and stood. "Thank you, Tina," she said evenly. "I'll take it from here." She stepped out into the rain. The clouds had lowered, heavy and close, flattening the light over the parking lot. For a moment she just stood there, breathing in the cold, damp air until her pulse slowed. Then she walked to her car, a beige sedan still smelling faintly of lavender oil from her last grocery run, and sat behind the wheel. Her hands rested on the steering wheel, still and firm. Not frail, not confused, just angry. In her mind, Caleb's voice echoed, patronizing, coaxing, always pretending he was helping. "You shouldn't be managing all this money alone, Mom. It's a lot for someone your age." She'd laughed at the time. Now that laughter felt like a mistake. Maggie opened her purse, took out the folder, and read the petition again. Every word was a betrayal, dressed as concern. Cognitive instability, declining judgment, possible risk to assets. Lies, wrapped in legalese. She flipped past the last page and found a yellow sticky note tucked at the bottom. Call if you have questions. Caleb. His number, written in that smug, confident scrawl. Maggie tore it neatly in half. Outside, the rain thickened, blurring the world into silver streaks. She started the car, the wipers brushing away the fog as she pulled onto the quiet street lined with moss-dark fences and budding maples. Halfway home, she slowed at a red light. The corner bank sign blinked, "Community you can trust." She almost laughed, then didn't. At the next block, she turned left instead of right. The sign for parish and parish elder law gleamed faintly through the drizzle. She parked, engine running, watching the office windows glow with that steady morning light. Doug Parrish. It had been years since she'd needed him, but she still kept his number in her wallet. Old habits, good ones, die hard. She reached for her purse, flipped open her worn leather wallet, and found the card tucked behind her Medicare ID. His ink had faded, but the name was still there. Maggie took one slow breath and murmured to herself, "Let's see how he likes being the one caught off guard." She stepped out of the car, rain soaking her shoulders, determination cutting through the chill. Inside, a bell chimed as she opened the law office door, and everything in her life began to shift. Doug Parrish hadn't changed much. His hair had thinned a little, and the corner of his office now held a treadmill that clearly hadn't been used since Christmas. But his eyes were the same, sharp, kind, and quietly outraged by injustice. He stood when Maggie entered, taking in her damp coat and the tightness around her mouth. "Maggie Lorne," he said, half smile, half frown. "It's been too long. I wish it were under better circumstances." She placed the folder on his desk. "You'll want to read that?" Doug sat, slipping on his reading glasses. The rain whispered against the window while he flipped through the pages, his eyebrows drawing together line by line. By the second page, he was shaking his head. "Cognitive instability," he muttered. "Full access transfer to your son. Temporary guardianship pending court approval. And they've cited declining mental fitness with no medical corroboration." He looked up. "This isn't sloppy, Maggie. It's predatory." "I know," she said quietly. Doug leaned back, tapping the pen against his pad. "You've handled your finances for how many years now?" 42. "And you're still living independently?" She gave him a level look. "You see any nurse's aide parked outside?" That earned her a thin smile. "Fair enough. We'll stop this before it lands on a judge's desk." Doug turned to his computer, typing fast. "We'll file an emergency injunction, today. That freezes the guardianship proceedings and flags his petition as contested. Once that's in motion, the bank has to lift their freeze, at least partially." Maggie nodded, her composure returning like a coat buttoned back up. "Do it." He picked up the phone, gave his paralegal clipped instructions, then turned back to her. "Maggie, I'm going to need a witness statement from the bank confirming what they told you. Tina Green, right?" "Yes," Maggie said. She seemed uncomfortable about the whole thing. "Good. That's leverage." He reached into his drawer, produced a single sheet of paper, and slid it toward her. "Sign here to authorize me to act on your behalf." The pen didn't tremble in her hand. When she finished, Doug smiled grimly. "You've just declared legal war, Maggie." Her voice was steady. He fired first. At Salem Community Bank that afternoon, Tina Green closed her office blinds halfway and picked up her desk phone. Her tone was quiet but sure. "Compliance? This is Tina. About the guardianship flag on Margaret Lorne's account. I'd like to document a concern. Yes, suspicious filing, possible conflict of interest, no supporting documentation. I'm sending copies to legal." She hung up, exhaled, and rubbed her temples. Some people, she thought, had no shame dressing greed up as care. That evening, Maggie returned home to find Caleb and Melinda waiting at the dining table. 2 plates, reheated lasagna, and the faint air of ambush. Caleb's voice was smooth, rehearsed. "Mom, we just wanted to talk. You've been under so much stress lately. The money stuff, well, it's complicated." "I'm aware," she said, setting her purse on the counter. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "It's for your protection, Mom. You've worked hard your whole life. We just want to make sure nothing slips through the cracks." Maggie studied him, the same little tilt of his head he used as a boy when he wanted something. He'd learned how to sound gentle while pulling strings. "My protection," she repeated. "That's what you're calling this." Caleb smiled, mistaking her calm for concession. "Exactly. You can still live comfortably. We'll handle the paperwork, the bills." "You've mistaken silence," she said softly, "for surrender." His mouth opened, then closed again. Maggie walked past him to the window, watching the rain blur the porch light. "You froze my accounts without a word. You tried to label me incompetent. That's not protection, Caleb. That's theft in slow motion." Melinda stirred. "You're overreacting." Maggie turned, her eyes colder than he'd ever seen them. "You'll both get your reaction soon enough." The clock ticked loudly in the silence that followed. Caleb sat back, the first flicker of unease shadowing his confidence. When Maggie finally spoke again, her tone was almost kind. "Dinner's good, though. Be sure to enjoy it while you can." She picked up her coat and headed for the door. Outside, the night smelled of wet cedar and something electric. Momentum, gathering. Her phone buzzed as she reached the car. A text from Doug. "Injunction filed. Court accepted immediate review. You're officially off freeze." Maggie smiled, the first true smile all day. She looked up at her son's house, lights burning behind the curtains, and murmured, "Round one's over." The rain came harder, drumming on the hood like applause. The clinic smelled faintly of antiseptic and coffee, an odd blend of precision and exhaustion. Maggie sat straight-backed in the neuropsychologist's office, her reading glasses perched low, her hands folded neatly on the desk. Dr. Candace Mercer, a brisk woman in her 50s with a tidy bun and sharp blue eyes, offered a kind smile. "We'll run a few standard assessments today, Mrs. Lorne. Nothing invasive. Just some memory, reasoning, and problem-solving tasks." Maggie nodded. "I'm ready when you are." It wasn't nerves that quickened her pulse, it was purpose. For 2 hours she traced geometric figures, recalled story sequences, spelled words backward, and balanced equations most people hadn't seen since high school. The doctor's pen scratched quickly across her clipboard. When the final test ended, Dr. Mercer looked at Maggie over the rim of her glasses and said, almost with admiration, "You're sharper than half the people who come through here for job evaluations." Maggie smiled faintly. "Good. Be sure to write that part down." 2 days later, Doug Parrish stood beside her in the courthouse's echoing hallway, a manila envelope tucked under his arm. Caleb arrived 10 minutes late. Melinda, trailing behind, phone clutched like a lifeline. Caleb's suit was too tight across the shoulders. "Nervous weight gain," Maggie noted. He tried to sound casual. "Mom, we could have handled this privately." Maggie didn't bother replying. Doug simply said, "Privately is how you tried to take everything." Inside the small hearing room, the air smelled of paper and disinfectant. The judge, a silver-haired woman with reading glasses on a chain, flipped through the file. Doug waited until she asked about the medical basis of the petition before sliding the envelope forward. "Your Honor," he said smoothly, "the respondent has completed an independent neuropsychological evaluation. Full results. Signed and certified by Dr. Candace Mercer, OHSU." The judge skimmed the first page, eyebrows lifting. "Perfect cognitive function?" "Yes, ma'am." Doug allowed himself a brief smile. Not so much as a missed recall. Caleb's face flushed. That can't be right. She forgets things all the time. Doug turned, voice calm but cold. You're referring to the time she forgot your birthday card while she was wiring your mortgage payment? The courtroom let out the smallest ripple of laughter. The judge cleared her throat. Mr. Lorne, your petition rests entirely on unsubstantiated claims. I'm dismissing the guardianship filing effective immediately. Maggie sat still as the words sank in. Relief didn't show on her face, only quiet vindication. Caleb slumped, Melinda staring hard at the table. Doug closed his folder with a soft snap. Thank you, Your Honor. We'll be filing for dismissal with prejudice to prevent future harassment. When it was over, Maggie stood, met her son's eyes, and said in a tone so calm it chilled the room, You tried to take my mind from me. Now you can live, knowing I passed every test. Caleb didn't answer. He couldn't. That afternoon, Tina Green received the official court notice via email. The subject line read, Guardianship case dismissed. Release financial freeze. She exhaled in relief, then clicked Approve. In her notes, she added a final remark for compliance. Customer verified mentally competent. Freeze lifted immediately. For the first time in a week, she smiled. At home, Maggie sat at her kitchen table surrounded by open folders, checkbooks, and the steady hum of her printer. She methodically reactivated each account, transferring 70% of her funds into a private trust Doug had arranged. Asset protection, he'd called it. Maggie thought of it as armor. She wasn't hiding from Caleb. She was preparing for whatever came next. The last transfer confirmation beeped on her laptop. Balance secured. The rain outside had softened to a mist, streaking the window with faint silver lines. The house was quiet except for the sound of her pen scratching across a note. Trust revocable. Executor, self. Her phone buzzed. Lacey Ruiz. Still thinking of renting that cottage by the park? It just came open. Maggie looked up from the ledger, a slow smile forming. The cottage, 2 doors down, fenced, quiet. A small place with a big statement. She typed back, Let's talk tomorrow. I want it done quietly. Her reflection in the dark window looked steady, composed, utterly unbroken. She turned off the light, the glow from her laptop screen fading last, illuminating the legal envelope one more time. Across the top, bold and permanent. Case dismissed. Maggie closed the folder, murmuring under her breath, And this time, I keep the pen. Outside, the night deepened, and the soft hum of the printer fell silent, just before the phone rang again. Unknown number. She let it ring once, twice, then stopped it cold. Round 2 was hers now. The morning after the court's dismissal, Salem was washed clean. The rain had moved on, leaving behind a film of brightness on every leaf and car hood. Maggie stood at her kitchen window, coffee mug in hand, watching the world glisten. Across the street, the air still smelled faintly of cedar and wet concrete. It looked like a morning worth reclaiming. Her phone chimed. Lacey Ruiz. Lacey. Cottage is empty. Want to see it before anyone knows? Maggie. Be there in 10. She didn't need to think. The decision had been made somewhere deep in her bones the moment Caleb's petition hit her desk. The cottage sat 2 doors down from her current home, tucked behind a lattice fence of pale gray wood. Moss edged the corners, and a bird bath leaned slightly to one side like it had been waiting for someone to notice. Maggie stepped through the gate, her boots crunching softly on the gravel path. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and wood smoke. A small living room opened into a galley kitchen, light spilling through narrow windows. The place had character, not flash. Hand-carved baseboards, scuffed but solid floors, a wide porch with just enough space for a chair and a tea table. Lacey's voice broke the silence. Feels right, doesn't it? Maggie turned, smiling faintly. Feels like it minds its own business. That's the best kind of neighbor. Lacey grinned, flipping through her clipboard. Owners in Arizona. He's trying to sell fast. Cash only, quiet listing. You'll have to wire funds within 48 hours if you want to beat the market. Cash is fine. Lacey blinked. You're not even going to haggle? No, Maggie said. I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here to disappear, without moving far. Lacey studied her for a beat, then nodded. I'll draft the papers today. No sign in the yard, no listing online. It'll be ours before anyone even knows it's on the market. Ours? Lacey smiled. I meant yours. But I like the way that sounded. By afternoon, Doug Parrish had already faxed a protective order to the county clerk's office. His voice on the phone was brisk but satisfied. It's done, he said. The order blocks Caleb or any representative from touching your financial data. It's airtight. Thank you, Maggie replied. You'll get pushback, maybe a visit. Ignore it. The system's on your side now. She could almost hear him smile. And Maggie? Yes? Nicely done at the hearing. I haven't seen anyone dismantle a baseless claim that cleanly since law school. Maggie chuckled softly. Maybe I missed my calling. Or maybe you just found it late. That night, the neighborhood was quiet. Caleb's house, 3 doors down, glowed with the blue light of a television. Maggie moved through her own house like a shadow. Deliberate, steady. She didn't turn on the overhead lights. She didn't want to wake ghosts or memories. In her bedroom, she opened the cedar chest at the foot of her bed. One by one, she removed her valuables. Her wedding ring, the pearls Doug's late wife had given her years ago, a small box of savings bonds her husband had tucked away before he passed. Each went carefully into a padded envelope labeled for transfer. Next came the documents. Birth certificate, house deed, medical directive, trust papers. She packed them into a weatherproof case and locked it with a quiet click. In the hallway, her reflection in the mirror stopped her. For the first time, she didn't see someone fighting to stay in control. She saw a woman who already was. Downstairs, she loaded the envelopes into the trunk of her sedan. The night air was cool, damp with the smell of rain-soaked pine. A porch light flickered next door, but no one came out. Back inside, she took one last walk through the house. The photographs on the mantel, Caleb as a boy, grinning with a scraped knee, stayed where they were. Let him wonder why she hadn't taken them. Let him guess. When she reached her bedroom door, her phone buzzed again. Lacey. Got your offer accepted. Deed transfers in process. I'll have keys in 72 hours. Maggie allowed herself a long exhale, the kind that feels like starting over. She turned off the last lamp, her room slipping into shadow. Across the street, Caleb sat on his couch, unaware. The glow of his phone lit his face as he scrolled through emails, one hand wrapped around a beer bottle. He didn't hear the car engine purr to life outside, didn't see the beige sedan glide quietly down the block toward a new driveway only 2 doors away. Inside the car, Maggie's hands rested easily on the wheel. The road ahead gleamed under the streetlights, smooth and certain. In her rearview mirror, her son's window glowed faintly, unseeing, unknowing. Perfect, she whispered. She shifted into drive. The moving truck arrived at dawn, its tires whispering over the damp asphalt. Salem was still half asleep, the streetlights buzzing faintly against a low morning fog. Maggie opened the front door before the movers could knock. You're early, she said. The foreman, a big man, with gentle eyes, smiled. Traffic was light. You said light load, right? Light, Maggie confirmed. And quiet. They nodded. Within minutes, padded boxes and labeled crates began to vanish through the door. Efficient, wordless choreography. Maggie guided them with calm precision, each item already mapped in her head. A dresser, 2 armchairs, a small bookcase, Nothing sentimental enough for questions. By 9:30 a.m., her house looked hollow. The air held that faint echo of absence, a sound she recognized from hospital rooms after discharge. It wasn't grief, it was release. She paused in the hallway one last time, running her fingers along the wall, then down to the light switch she'd flipped every morning for 30 years. "Goodbye, darling," she murmured, not to the house, but to the version of herself that had tolerated Caleb's control for too long. Outside, the movers shut the truck doors. "Next stop?" She handed them the address, 2 doors down. At precisely 11:30, they were done. Boxes stacked neatly, furniture placed just as she'd imagined. Maggie stood on the small porch of her new home, watching the last traces of fog burn off the trees. Her tea steamed in a plain white mug, its warmth grounding her. From where she sat, she could see the old house clearly, the curtains drawn, the porch empty. The image didn't stir nostalgia, only peace. When the movers waved goodbye, she returned their wave, then turned her chair slightly so she could face Caleb's driveway. The irony wasn't lost on her. 2 doors away, invisible but very much present. Caleb returned just after noon, grocery bags in hand. The first thing he noticed was the silence. Usually, he could hear the faint sound of his mother's kettle or the television drifting through the open windows. "Mom?" he called, stepping inside. No answer. He frowned and climbed the stairs. Her bedroom door stood open. Inside, bare dresser, stripped bed, closet empty except for a single wire hanger swaying slightly. On the nightstand sat one envelope, blank except for his name. "Melinda!" he shouted. She appeared in the hallway, arms crossed. "What?" "She's gone." Melinda blinked. "Gone where?" He opened the envelope. Inside was a single index card. "Be careful who you call unstable." Melinda snatched the card. Where the hell did she go? Caleb turned in a slow circle, scanning the bare room, his expression flickering between anger and disbelief. "She can't have gone far," he said finally. "She doesn't even drive much." Outside, his mother's beige sedan sat neatly parked on a different driveway, one he hadn't noticed yet. From her new porch, Maggie watched them pace in and out of the house. Their voices carried faintly through the wet morning air, sharp with confusion. She took another sip of tea, lemon and mint cutting through the fog. Her phone buzzed. Doug Parrish's name appeared. "Maggie," he said, when she answered. "I just got confirmation from the clerk. Your son's guardianship case is officially dismissed with prejudice. They can't reopen it." She smiled. "Good, let's make sure they remember that." "I already have. There's one more thing." "Oh?" "I drafted something you might like better than a restraining order." There was a pause. "Go on," she said. "A civil complaint. Attempted financial exploitation of a dependent adult. It's a quiet filing. No press yet. No court summons. But it puts his name in the system, tied to the accusation. Paper trail's clean, airtight, and invisible until we want it visible." Maggie felt a small thrill. Not vengeance, but justice, moving in silence. "File it." "You're sure?" "Doug," she said, steady as rain on glass. "He tried to steal my life. Let's take a little of his peace." Doug exhaled softly. "Consider it done." She hung up, the call clicking into the hush of the room. The sunlight shifted, gold against the wood floor. Maggie leaned back in her chair, watching Caleb step onto the porch of her old home, scanning the street as if she'd evaporated. For a moment, his gaze passed over her new house, but didn't linger. Perfect. She raised her mug slightly as though toasting an invisible audience. "You never did learn to look closer, did you?" Then, with the calm of someone who'd just moved the first piece in a long, deliberate game, she turned her chair toward the street and let the day carry on as if nothing had changed. Caleb Lorne had never been served before. He'd seen it in movies, Some poor fool caught off guard at his own front door, but he never expected to be the fool. When the knock came just after noon, he was halfway through a conference call, pacing the kitchen. Melinda opened the door first. "Caleb Lorne?" the man asked. He wore a windbreaker, clipboard in hand. Caleb stepped forward, impatient. "Yeah?" The man handed him a sealed envelope. "You've been served." Melinda blinked. "What is this?" Caleb tore it open, scanning the first few lines. The color drained from his face. Civil complaint. Attempted financial exploitation of an elder adult. Filed through Marion County Circuit Court. Plaintiff, Margaret Lorne. Melinda took a step closer, whispering, "She actually did it." Caleb dropped into a chair, the document trembling faintly in his hand. She wouldn't, but she had. Outside, the mail truck rolled past Maggie's new home. From her porch, she watched it with quiet satisfaction, sipping black tea this time. No sugar. The day smelled of wet pine and distant pavement. She imagined the moment that envelope touched her son's hand. Doug had called earlier, his tone dry as legal paper. "Served at 12:07. He looked surprised." Maggie smiled. "Good. He's been due for a surprise." By late afternoon, she sat in Doug's office once again, the two of them reviewing updates to her will. The rain had returned, soft and rhythmic against the window. "You're sure about this?" Doug asked, adjusting his glasses. "No next of kin listed. Everything directed to the Salem Hospice Fund." Maggie didn't hesitate. "They took care of my neighbor last year when her family wouldn't. They earn what he hasn't." Doug nodded approvingly. "Then we'll remove Caleb as heir and executor. Clean and final." He slid the new draft toward her. Maggie signed without pause. When she finished, Doug leaned back. "You've just rewritten your legacy." She smiled faintly. "I'm just fixing a clerical error life made." The next stop was Salem Community Bank. The gray clouds outside turned the glass into a mirror, reflecting Maggie's steady expression as she entered. Tina Green looked up from her desk and broke into a small, relieved smile. "Mrs. Lorne, I was hoping I'd see you again." "Call me Maggie," she said, shaking her hand. Tina led her into the same office where it had all started. But this time, Maggie set the tone. "I need a checking account opened under the Lorne Trust," she said. "Primary signer, me. No joint access, no family links." "Of course," Tina said, nodding quickly. "I already reviewed the documentation from your attorney." They worked efficiently, signatures flowing without hesitation. When it was done, Tina hesitated for a moment, then opened a private message on her screen. She turned it toward Maggie for just a second. "Glad you're free. It didn't sit right with me." Maggie read it, then met Tina's eyes. "You did the right thing. Not everyone would have." Tina smiled, a flicker of pride breaking through her professionalism. "You'd be surprised how many people don't fight back." "I used to be one of them," Maggie said quietly. "Not anymore." That evening, the sound of rain returned in gentle bursts. Maggie stood on her small front porch, screwing the final camera mount into the corner beam. The red light blinked once, then held steady. She connected it to the hub on her phone, testing the feed. The screen came alive. Wide view of her driveway, the gate, and the path leading to her door. Every angle covered. She breathed easier. Security didn't mean fear. It meant ownership. As she tidied up the drill and cables, a knock came. Lacey Ruiz stood on the porch, hair damp from the drizzle, holding a wicker basket full of fresh flowers, muffins, and a bottle of sparkling cider. "Welcome officially to the neighborhood," Lacey said, smiling. "Even if you didn't exactly move far?" Maggie laughed softly. "Two doors can change everything." Lacey set the basket down on the porch railing. "You settling in okay?" "Better than I expected." Lacey's eyes flicked to the camera light. "Smart," she said. Never hurts to keep a record? Exactly, Maggie replied. Truth always looks better on video. They shared a quiet smile. When Lacey left, dusk had thickened into a calm, silver-gray haze. Maggie carried the basket inside and placed it on the counter. She uncorked the cider, poured a small glass, and raised it toward the window. Outside, Caleb's porch light flickered on across the way. She could just make out his silhouette, agitated, pacing, on the phone. Her phone buzzed again. A notification from Doug. Case accepted for preliminary review. Court date pending. Maggie set her glass down carefully, the bubbles catching the dim light like tiny sparks. Across the street, her son gestured sharply at someone she couldn't see. Melinda, probably. Still spinning his excuses, still believing control could be talked back into his hands. Maggie tapped her phone, zooming the new camera feed until his figure came into focus. "Let's see," she murmured, "how you handle being the one under observation." The red light blinked once, steady and silent, as the storm began again. The press release went out on a gray Tuesday morning, quiet but deliberate. 3 paragraphs of plain facts written in Doug Parrish's firm, steady style. It named no villains, no embellishments, just the truth. An elderly Salem resident successfully defended herself against an unauthorized guardianship petition and has filed a civil complaint alleging attempted financial exploitation. Doug had written it to read like any other small legal update, but he knew the power of clean, undeniable words. He faxed it to the Salem Chronicle just before noon. By 4 o'clock, a reporter was calling Maggie's house. "Mrs. Lorne, this is Amber Shaw from the Chronicle. I'm writing a piece on elder financial abuse cases. I understand you might be willing to comment." Maggie hesitated, one hand resting on the teacup beside her. She didn't owe anyone her story, but she'd learned what silence could cost. "I'll give you one quote," she said finally. "Short and true." Amber agreed. When the reporter arrived, Maggie met her on the porch, sweater draped over her shoulders, hair pinned back. She didn't want pity. She wanted presence. Amber flipped open her notebook. "Mrs. Lorne, how would you describe what happened?" Maggie met her eyes. "It's simple. My son tried to take my mind on paper before I ever lost it in life. He failed." Amber froze, then nodded slowly. "That's powerful. Anything else you'd like readers to understand?" Maggie thought for a moment, her voice soft but unshakable. "Protecting yourself doesn't mean you stop loving your family. It just means you start loving yourself enough to stop the harm." The reporter wrote every word. The next morning, the headline hit the stands. "Salem Woman Stops Son's Guardianship Grab." Below it, a subheading. "He tried to take my mind before I lost it," she says. By noon, the story was everywhere. Local talk radio picked it up, then an Oregon seniors blog reposted it. Comments poured in. Sons and daughters, nurses, retired teachers, widows who'd been pressured by their own families. Good for her. Finally, someone said it out loud. "This happens more than people know." Doug called mid-afternoon. "You're officially viral, Maggie." She smiled faintly. "I didn't plan to be." "You didn't have to. People recognize courage when they see it." Outside, the rain was starting again, soft and whispery on the gutters. Maggie sat by the window, her tea untouched. "It's not courage," she said quietly. "It's cleanup." Doug chuckled. "Then you've set a high bar for housework." That weekend, Maggie received an invitation from the Salem Senior Resource Center, typed neatly on pale blue letterhead. "We'd be honored if you would speak about your experience at our community meeting next Thursday." She almost declined. But the thought of all those quiet, nervous faces, people sitting on their own stories like ticking clocks, made her change her mind. The meeting drew more people than the center expected. Folding chairs filled the hall, and volunteers scrambled to add more along the back wall. Maggie walked up to the podium slowly, her presence commanding but unadorned. She wasn't here to inspire, she was here to confirm what too many already knew. Doug stood near the back, arms folded, watching her with quiet pride. She adjusted the microphone. "I won't talk long," she began. "This isn't about me." A hush fell over the room. "I was told once that getting older meant losing control of your health, your choices, your life. But I learned something different. Sometimes the people who love you the loudest are the ones who try to take everything when you're too tired to argue." Murmurs rippled through the audience. Agreement, pain, recognition. Maggie scanned their faces. A man clutching his sister's hand. A widow with tears just behind her eyes. "I'm not the only one," Maggie said softly, "and that's why I'm standing here." For a moment, silence. Then applause. Slow, rising, rolling through the room until it filled the air like a storm breaking. By the next morning, a clip of her speech was online. Someone from the audience had recorded it. 2,000 shares in the first 24 hours. Comments again. "This is my mother. This is me. This is what happens when we stay quiet." Maggie didn't watch it. She didn't need to. She'd said what she came to say. That evening, she stood on her porch again, the night alive with the sound of rain on leaves. Her phone buzzed. A text from Doug. "You made the evening news." They called it the Lorne lesson. Maggie smiled, looking across the street at Caleb's darkened windows. For the first time, no lights were on. "Good," she murmured. "Maybe he's finally learning something." The wind picked up, cool and sure, and somewhere beyond the pines, thunder rumbled, low, distant, and promising. It was just after dusk when the knock came. 3 polite taps, practiced and hollow. Maggie was at her kitchen table sorting through the day's mail. She didn't move at first. The porch light caught a shimmer of rain sliding down the window pane, and in that reflection she saw a shape. 2 silhouettes, side by side. Her cameras had already sent the alert. Front porch. Motion detected. She pressed the app on her phone. The feed came up instantly. Melinda stood at the door, umbrella folded, her posture rehearsed into something halfway between apology and entitlement. Behind her, Caleb lingered in the dark, head lowered, expression unreadable. Maggie rose slowly, the quiet hum of her kettle filling the space as she walked to the door. She opened it halfway. No more. Melinda's smile twitched. "Maggie, hi. I'm glad you're home." Maggie's voice was calm, deliberate. "You didn't check first." "We didn't want to intrude," Melinda said quickly. "We were just worried. Everything's gotten so messy." The rain made a soft ticking sound against the porch railing. Maggie's gaze flicked from Melinda to the shadow behind her. Caleb shifted but didn't speak. His silence told her everything. He was hoping she'd be the one to make it easy. "Worried?" Maggie asked. "Is that what you call it now?" Melinda's hands fluttered in front of her, twisting the handle of the umbrella. "We didn't mean for things to go so far. We were just trying to make sure you were okay. Maybe we overreacted, but—" "Then why?" Maggie interrupted, her tone as sharp as glass under velvet. "Did you submit legal paperwork declaring me mentally unfit?" Melinda froze. The porch light flickered, catching the sheen of rain in her hair. "It wasn't like that." Caleb thought he could get away with it," Maggie said, not raising her voice but cutting cleanly through hers. "You both did." "Maggie, please." Melinda took half a step forward. "Don't," Maggie warned. "The porch light isn't the only thing watching." Melinda blinked, confused, until she noticed the tiny red pinprick above the doorframe, the steady blink of the camera. Her face went still. "Maggie," Caleb said finally, his voice low and tired, "we just want to reset. Start over. What's done is done." Maggie studied him, the son who had once brought her coffee in bed on Mother's Day, who now stood 2 doors away like a stranger asking for entry into a life he'd already tried to claim. Reset? She repeated softly. You think you can undo theft with a word? Caleb swallowed. It's not theft. It was concern. Concern doesn't require signatures and notaries, she said. It requires trust. You cashed yours out months ago. Melinda's voice broke slightly. Can't we just move past it? Everyone makes mistakes. Maggie leaned a shoulder against the doorframe, calm and absolute. I already moved, she said. You're just not part of it. For a moment, the sound of the rain filled the silence between them, gentle, relentless. Melinda looked down. Caleb's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He'd always been the type who mistook stillness for weakness, and even now, he couldn't tell the difference. Maggie straightened, hand on the edge of the door. I don't hate you, she said evenly, but I won't let you near me again. Maggie, Mom. The word Mom caught in his throat, awkward and unfamiliar, like it didn't fit anymore. She met his eyes one last time. Doug told me something useful once. He said when someone shows you their character in ink, believe it. She began to close the door. Melinda tried again, voice small. You can't just shut us out. Maggie's tone softened, but her words did not. Watch me. The door clicked shut with finality. Outside, the porch light washed them in a cold glow. For a long moment, they didn't move. Then Caleb turned, shoving his hands into his pockets, and started down the steps. Melinda followed, her umbrella trembling in her grip. Inside, Maggie stood by the window, the rain reflecting against the glass like ripples of applause. Her phone buzzed. Recording saved, 02:37 minutes. She smiled faintly. Perfect timing. The kettle whistled in the kitchen. She went to it, steady, pouring hot water into her mug. As she stirred the tea, thunder rolled faintly beyond the trees. On her phone, the camera feed replayed automatically, showing Caleb's face one last time, shamed, cornered, silent. Maggie turned off the screen and whispered to the empty room, the conversation's over. The reckoning isn't. Outside, lightning cracked through the clouds, white and brief, illuminating 2 retreating figures disappearing into the rain. Tina Green had just sat down with her second cup of coffee when her computer pinged, a routine notification from the internal monitoring system. Alert. Attempted access. Restricted client account. Client name. Margaret Lorne. Her stomach tightened. She clicked it open. The request originated from an external terminal, flagged under Caleb Lorne's business credentials. Oh no, she muttered. Within seconds, she locked the account and opened the compliance chat. Tina G. Unauthorized query from family member on restricted trust, escalating to fraud prevention. Compliance. Copy. Document everything. We'll contact the state board. Tina stared at the screen for a long moment, feeling the old mix of anger and protectiveness that had been simmering since that first day Maggie stood in her office. Calm, drenched, betrayed. She typed one last note in the system. Attempted exploitation confirmed. Client protected. Across town, Doug Parrish's office light burned through the morning rain. He read Tina's report twice before picking up the phone. State Banking Board, Fraud Division, he said, when the clerk answered. This is Attorney Douglas Parrish, representing Mrs. Margaret Lorne. I'm submitting a formal complaint against Mr. Caleb Lorne. Attempted unauthorized access of protected financial assets. He paused, letting the words settle. Yes, I'll send documentation. Time-stamped, verified by Salem Community Bank. When he hung up, he smiled grimly. Some stories didn't need drama, they just needed paperwork. Maggie was ready for this. She'd been up since dawn, her laptop open to 3 browser tabs: Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. Her fingers moved steadily, entering her information, confirming each prompt. Freeze credit. Confirm identity. Apply lock across all bureaus. When the final confirmation email came through, she sat back, exhaling. Every line of defense she built made her calmer, not colder. Her phone buzzed. Doug. You're bulletproof now, he said, and the board's already reviewing Caleb's activity. It's only a matter of time before his employer hears about it. I'm not trying to ruin him, Maggie said. I know, Doug replied, but the truth doesn't need your help to ruin a liar. That afternoon, the Salem Senior Resource Center was hosting a workshop on digital safety. They'd asked Maggie to join as a guest speaker after her viral story. She hadn't planned to accept, but she showed up anyway, modestly dressed, glasses perched low, notes folded neatly in her purse. About 20 seniors filled the small classroom. The air smelled faintly of old books and cinnamon rolls from the bake sale next door. When it was her turn, Maggie stood and looked around the room, faces that mirrored hers. Lines of endurance, eyes that had seen too much and been believed too little. I'm not a banker or a lawyer, she began. I'm a nurse who learned late how to read a different kind of chart, the one people write when they want your life on paper. A few people nodded. They'll call it protection, help, love, but they'll ask for access, signatures, power of attorney. Don't sign until you've asked yourself one question. Would they still love me if I said no? The room went silent. Someone at the back whispered, That's exactly what my nephew said. Maggie smiled softly. Then you already know your answer. When the session ended, 2 women approached her to say thank you. One of them, trembling slightly, said, You just saved me from making a mistake. Maggie nodded. Then it was worth the walk. At the same hour, Melinda's phone buzzed while she was in the checkout line at Safeway. The caller ID said IRS Regional Office. She answered nervously. The voice on the other end was polite, official. Mrs. Lorne, this is a routine courtesy call. We're reviewing your recent tax filings. There appear to be inconsistencies in the dependent care section. Nothing serious, just a verification audit. Melinda's face drained of color. Audit? Standard procedure, the voice said smoothly. You'll receive written notice. The call ended before she could respond. She stood still for a full minute, groceries forgotten, heart pounding. When she finally looked up, Caleb was waiting in the parking lot, pacing beside his car. She walked toward him, eyes wide. They're auditing us. He barely heard her. His own phone had just buzzed, a message from HR. HR email. Immediate administrative leave. Pending internal ethics review. Subject: allegation of financial misconduct related to external civil complaint. Caleb's vision blurred. He reread the email twice, then sank back into the driver's seat. Rain tapped the windshield, steady, merciless. He stared across the parking lot, fists clenched. Somewhere, his mother was probably pouring tea, maybe even smiling. The thought made him sick and scared. He'd underestimated her. Again. Back at her house, Maggie sat by the window, watching a crow pick at the wet grass. Her phone buzzed once more. Doug again. Caleb's on administrative leave, he said. It's spreading fast. Maggie closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them, steady and clear. Then it's working. Doug's voice softened. You all right? I am, she said quietly. For the first time in a long time. Outside, the clouds broke just enough for a shard of sunlight to touch her window, gold against the rain-streaked glass. She lifted her cup, the reflection of that light shimmering across the tea. He wanted control, she murmured. Now he can watch what it looks like when someone else holds it. The security camera outside blinked once, catching the faintest smile on her face. The letter arrived on thick company stationery. No envelope, Just a flat, emotionless email printout from Human Resources, Pacific Northwest Financial Services. Maggie read it once, then again, slowly. Subject: Notification of permanent suspension. Mr. Caleb Lorne. The message was brief. Following internal review, Mr. Lorne's position is suspended pending final termination for ethics violations relating to fiduciary misconduct. Maggie let the paper settle on her lap. The words didn't make her gloat. They just felt inevitable, like the click of a lock she'd known was there all along. The phone rang. Doug Parrish's voice came through, low and practical. "He's officially out," he said. "They'll finalize the firing within the week." Maggie said nothing for a moment. "It's strange," she murmured, "how silence can make such a noise." Doug chuckled softly. "Well, it's about to get noisier. I've requested a formal deposition date. His attorney called me this morning, already trying to spin things." "Spin?" "They're offering a quiet settlement," Doug said. "Low 5 figures, confidentiality clause, no admission of wrongdoing, typical damage control." Maggie's laugh was short, clean, and sharp. "They want silence again." "Exactly. They think you'll take the money and fade out." "Then they still don't understand who I am?" Doug paused, smiling on the other end. "You're sure you want it public? Once it's filed, it's permanent record." "That's the point," Maggie said. "I'm not settling, I'm documenting." Doug exhaled through the receiver. "All right then, we'll proceed. I'll schedule the deposition and notify the court." "Doug?" "Yes?" "Make sure it's in the biggest conference room they have." The day unfolded quietly after that. Sunlight pooling across the floorboards of Maggie's living room, the air rich with the scent of brewing coffee. The tension that had once filled her house was gone. In its place was something lighter, clearer. By mid-afternoon, she had set aside the paperwork and taken her book and tea out to the porch. The spring air carried the sound of kids riding bikes and a neighbor's dog barking somewhere down the block. Normal life had returned, but it wore a new shape, one that belonged entirely to her. She turned a page and smiled to herself. The novel was a courtroom thriller, and she found herself underlining a line that read, "Justice doesn't whisper, it echoes." A text from Doug appeared on her phone. "Deposition scheduled for next Thursday. Public access confirmed." She typed back, "Perfect. Let him feel what exposure tastes like." Just before 5, she heard footsteps on the sidewalk. Slow, heavy, familiar. Maggie didn't look up right away. She could feel his presence before she saw him. Caleb. He was walking home from somewhere, his tie loose, his shoulders slumped beneath the weight of humiliation. The company badge that once swung proudly from his belt was gone. Maggie kept her eyes on her book, but her peripheral vision caught him glancing toward her porch. He hesitated at the edge of her walkway. She could almost hear the gears in his mind. Maybe she'd forgive him. Maybe he'd explain. Maybe this was all a misunderstanding. But the way he stood there, small, uncertain, told her he already knew better. When she finally looked up, their eyes met for a fraction of a second. He opened his mouth as if to speak. She turned a page. That was enough. Caleb's jaw tightened. He looked down and kept walking, the click of his shoes fading down the street. Maggie let out a slow, steady breath. The porch light caught the rim of her teacup, glinting like a quiet crown. Her phone buzzed again. A new notification from the court portal. "Deposition scheduled. Lorne v. Lorne. Public docket created." She set the phone face down and looked out over the neighborhood. The rain had started again, gentle but persistent, washing the street in silver. Doug had once told her that revenge wasn't fire. It was architecture. You built it piece by piece until it stood on its own. She took a sip of tea, the warmth spreading through her chest. "Almost finished," she whispered. The security camera light blinked once, catching the moment she smiled. Across the street, Caleb's silhouette passed beneath the lamplight, small and unsteady. The storm clouds thickened overhead, rolling low and dark across the sky. And in the hush before the thunder broke, Maggie whispered the words she'd waited a lifetime to say. Soft, certain, final. Now you answer the questions. The deposition room smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and burnt coffee, an unremarkable space for a reckoning years in the making. A rectangular table cut the room in half, one side polished with order, the other littered with legal pads and nervous hands. Maggie sat at the center of her side, posture straight, eyes clear. Doug Parrish flanked her, steady as bedrock. Across from them sat Caleb, disheveled, pale, the faint shadows of exhaustion under his eyes. His attorney whispered something in his ear, but Maggie didn't care enough to guess what. The court reporter adjusted her microphone. We're on record. Case, Lorne versus Lorne. Proceed. Doug nodded to Maggie. Go ahead. Maggie opened the manila folder in front of her. Inside, neatly paper-clipped, were months of bank statements, subscription receipts, and credit reports, each marked with a small red circle, quiet theft disguised as everyday noise. She began calmly, her voice even. These are the streaming and subscription charges from my accounts. Services I never used. Hulu, Amazon Prime, Spotify Family Plan, dating sites. She looked at Caleb, her tone sharp as glass. Your taste in music is worse than your judgment. Doug suppressed a smirk. Please continue. She flipped another page. These are records of duplicate withdrawals. $40 here, $60 there. Spread out over 4 years. None flagged because the totals were small. She tapped her finger on one entry. They always are when you're testing limits. The room was silent except for the soft click of the court reporter's keys. Caleb shifted in his chair. His attorney cleared his throat. Mrs. Lorne, with all due respect, small financial inconsistencies are not uncommon among family members sharing. Doug cut him off. If by sharing, you mean theft and forgery, I'll stipulate to that. The attorney bristled. We dispute the characterization. Doug slid a printed photo across the table. Then dispute the footage. My client's security camera caught your client retrieving mail from her locked box 3 separate times after moving out. Caleb froze. Doug's voice dropped lower, almost compassionate. The problem with paper trails, Mr. Lorne, is that they never forget where they've been. The attorney leaned toward his client, whispering urgently. Caleb's eyes flicked to Maggie's for the first time that morning, pleading, ashamed, cornered. Maggie met his gaze without anger, only certainty. You didn't steal for need, she said softly. You did it because you thought I'd never notice. The court reporter paused her typing for a heartbeat before resuming. Doug straightened. Mrs. Lorne, thank you. No further statements at this time. He turned to the judge overseeing the civil review. We submit this evidence with request for restitution and formal damages in the amount of $78,000, representing cumulative unauthorized transactions, identity interference, and personal loss. The judge's ruling came fast and unambiguous. Granted. A single word, granted, echoed through the room like a verdict of balance restored. Caleb slumped, his attorney already gathering papers. Doug began signing forms with precise, fluid strokes. Maggie just sat quietly, breathing it in. When it was over, she stood, slid her folder shut, and looked at Caleb one last time. Now you know what small things add up to. That afternoon, Doug met her at the coffee shop downtown. Checks in motion, he said. I'll have the funds routed through the trust, then set up the charitable giving fund in your name. What did you call it again? Maggie asked. The Lorne Resilience Fund, for seniors fighting guardianship fraud. Has a nice ring to it. Maggie smiled faintly. It does. You sure you don't want to keep a portion? She shook her head. It's not about reclaiming money, it's about reclaiming ownership. Doug nodded, understanding. That evening, the digital noise began to fade. Melinda's social media accounts, once full of family photos and motivational quotes, vanished one by one, deleted, deactivated, scrubbed. Her name disappeared from searches as if it had never existed. Maggie saw it happen in real time, her security alert pinging when Melinda's old tag links broke. She didn't feel triumph, just closure. A few hours later, her phone rang once. Caleb. She let it vibrate in her hand, then pressed block. No message, no trace. Just silence. In her study, the lamp cast a warm glow over a single sheet of paper. Her will. Maggie picked up a pen, steady and deliberate, and added a line beneath her signature. To those who come after, what you inherit is not what's given, but what's earned. She capped the pen, folded the document, and placed it back into the fireproof box. Outside, the rain had returned, a gentle mist brushing against her window. She sat back, watching droplets race down the glass. Doug's words replayed in her mind. Revenge isn't fire, it's architecture. Maybe so, but tonight, the structure stood tall and gleaming, built from truth, not hate. The clock ticked softly behind her. She took a deep breath and whispered to the quiet room, "Your debt's settled." Lightning flashed once across the sky, illuminating her reflection in the window, calm, composed, unbreakable. Then the thunder followed, low and rolling, as if the world itself agreed. The microphone light blinked red. Maggie adjusted her headset, listening to the quiet hum in her ear as the producer counted down from 3. The studio smelled faintly of dust and coffee, wires coiled across the floor like veins carrying stories instead of blood. "This is the Oregon Current," the host began, her voice steady and warm. "Today, we're joined by Margaret Lorne, a Salem resident whose story has sparked statewide discussion about financial guardianship laws. Mrs. Lorne, thank you for being here." "Please," Maggie said with a small smile. "Call me Maggie." "Of course, Maggie. Your case went public after you defended yourself against a fraudulent guardianship petition filed by your own son. You've since helped other seniors protect their assets. How does it feel, knowing your story has reached so many people?" Maggie leaned toward the mic. Her voice was calm, measured, and unshaken by the weight of the question. "It feels necessary," she said. "We talk about aging like it's a slow vanishing, but it's not. It's visibility that disappears first. People stop looking at you as capable. That's when they start writing their own version of your story." The host nodded, jotting notes. "And you've decided to reclaim that story?" "I just stopped letting someone else narrate it," Maggie said. "People think revenge is about rage, but mine isn't. It's about restoration. Dignity is a quiet kind of power." Silence hung in the room, thick, contemplative, powerful. The host broke it softly. "You've had offers to write a book, even a documentary deal, yet you turned them down. Why?" "Because this isn't entertainment," Maggie replied. "It's a warning." The producer behind the glass raised an eyebrow, signaling they'd struck gold. The interview ran for 40 minutes, but the recording pulsed with something timeless, Maggie's unflinching clarity. When it ended, the host shook her hand with genuine reverence. "You didn't sound angry," she said quietly. "Most people would." Maggie smiled faintly. "I already spent my anger. Now I'm building with what's left." 2 days later, the Oregon Current released the episode. Guardianship Gone Wrong: One Woman's Stand Against Family Exploitation. Within hours, it climbed to the top of local podcast charts. The inbox filled faster than the producer could read. Emails poured in from across the country: Florida, Michigan, California. My mother signed everything over to my brother. We didn't realize what was happening until it was too late. I'm a caregiver in Arizona. I've seen this before. Thank you for saying what no one wants to hear. You gave me courage to call a lawyer. The messages stacked by the hundreds, then thousands. Some were grateful, some desperate. All of them haunted by a common thread, people silenced by family, now finding their voices. Maggie sat at her kitchen table reading them one evening, tea cooling beside her. Each message felt like a hand reaching across the dark. She answered as many as she could. Keep your own lawyer, keep your own account, keep your own story. By nightfall, her inbox counter blinked 2,117 unread. Doug's phone rang early the next morning. He was halfway through his first cup of coffee when the voice on the other end introduced itself. This is Emily Rhodes from State Senator Carol Langley's office. Doug straightened in his chair. Yes, of course. We heard your client's interview, Rhodes said. The senator wants to propose legislation addressing digital and financial elder abuse, particularly involving guardianship fraud. We'd like Mrs. Lorne's input for the initial draft. Doug's eyebrows lifted. You're serious? Very. The public response has been overwhelming. She's not just a case anymore. She's a catalyst. Doug smiled to himself. She'll want to hear this directly. When he told Maggie later that afternoon, she listened in silence, hands folded on the table, eyes distant but steady. They want your help, Doug said. Not as a plaintiff this time, as a voice. Maggie looked out the window, where rain glimmered along the picket fence like small threads of silver. They want to write a law? Yes. A bill to strengthen oversight and accountability in guardianship filings. You'd be part of the advisory team. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, finally, she nodded. I'll do it. On one condition. Doug tilted his head. What's that? When they draft it, I want them to include a clause, one that protects more than just the money. Doug frowned slightly. What do you mean? Maggie turned back toward him, her voice calm but edged with conviction. Include a clause about dignity. If the law doesn't see us as people first, it'll fail before the ink dries. Doug smiled, slow and proud. I'll make sure they hear that word. That night, the podcast replayed quietly through Maggie's living room speakers. Her voice, steady, calm, unflinching, floated through the air like a promise that had finally been kept. She sat back in her armchair, one lamp glowing beside her, letters spread across the coffee table. So many voices, so much grief, all echoing towards something bigger than her revenge. This was no longer just her story. It was a blueprint. Outside, the wind shifted, rustling through the pine trees. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled, faint but moving closer. Maggie picked up a pen and wrote a single line in her notebook. Power taken is theft. Power reclaimed is law. She closed the cover, set it beside her tea, and looked toward the dark window. Her reflection stared back, serene, unbroken, and now unerasable. The envelope was cream-colored, the kind that pretended to carry something sincere. No return address, just her name typed neatly across the front, Mrs. Margaret Lorne. It arrived with the morning mail, tucked between a utility statement and a flyer for roof repairs. Maggie stood at her kitchen counter, steam curling from her coffee, staring at it for a long minute before sliding her letter opener under the flap. Inside was 3 pages, written in Caleb's cramped, uneven handwriting. She read the first line aloud under her breath. Mom, I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to understand. She read it all. Slowly, thoroughly. Each paragraph was its own little trick. A confession built on excuses. Regret, laced with self-pity. I only did what I thought was best. I never meant for it to go that far. You've always been so strong. I didn't think you'd actually get hurt. By the second page, his guilt had turned into justification. By the third, he was trying to rewrite history. Maybe we could start over someday. Family doesn't disappear, even when it disappoints itself. Maggie exhaled sharply through her nose. Disappoints itself, she repeated. That's one way to name theft. She folded the letter once, then again. Clean lines, sharp corners. The shredder in her study waited patiently. She fed the paper, in, one sheet at a time, listening to the slow, deliberate hum as the blades turned it to ribbons. When it was done, she brushed the paper dust from her palms and said softly, "Now you're just background noise." Later that morning, Doug stopped by. He carried a folder under his arm, his tie slightly askew from the wind. "I just came from the courthouse," he said. "The judge signed the permanent no-contact order. It's airtight, digital, physical, all of it." Maggie nodded. "So if he shows up?" "He won't," Doug said. "But if he does, the police will show up before he reaches the porch." She poured him coffee without asking. "Thank you." "You sound tired," he said. "I'm not tired," she said. "Just done." Doug gave a small, knowing smile. Done has a nice ring to it. 2 weeks passed quietly. Spring edged toward summer, the rain thinning into mist that smelled of earth and new grass. The legislation committee had begun drafting the bill, and Maggie's name, advisory contributor, Lorne Amendment, Dignity Clause, appeared in print for the first time. That's when the gossip came. Melinda had filed for divorce. No announcement, no spectacle, just a one-line legal filing that landed in the public record like a whisper. The rumor mill said she'd left Salem entirely, gone to live with a sister in Idaho. When Doug told her, Maggie didn't gloat. She only said, she finally found a way out before he turned on her, too. One morning, a thick envelope appeared in her mailbox. University letterhead, neat and formal. Inside was a handwritten note on embossed paper. "Dear Mrs. Lorne, my name is Jasmine Cole. I'm the first recipient of the Lorne Resilience Nursing Scholarship. I just wanted to thank you, not just for the funding, but for the story that made it possible. I'll carry both into every room I walk into as a nurse." Maggie read it twice. Her throat tightened in a way she hadn't expected. The scholarship fund had been Doug's idea, but this was hers now. A legacy made of steady, deliberate kindness. She framed the note and set it on her mantel. That evening, Lacey Ruiz appeared on her porch, smiling under a burst of pink evening light. She carried a bakery box and a bottle of sparkling cider. "Don't tell me you forgot your 1-year anniversary," Lacey teased, setting the box down. Maggie smiled. "A year? A year since you moved in, and look at you, still running circles around everyone." Lacey opened the box. A small chocolate cake with careful white lettering. "Home. Strong. Free." "Too much?" Lacey asked. "Just enough," Maggie said, voice soft. "Stay for tea." They ate together on the porch, the air warm, bees moving lazily through the lilacs. When Lacey left, the street settled into its familiar quiet. Maggie lingered a while longer, her cup cooling in her hands. The streetlights buzzed to life. She was about to go inside when her phone buzzed. A notification from the county property portal. "Alert. Ownership change. 314 Crestwood Lane." She frowned. That was Caleb's address. She opened the link. Status: foreclosure. Holder: Pacific Northwest Financial Services. The same company he'd once worked for. For a moment, Maggie just stared at the screen, the absurd symmetry of it sinking in. The house he'd tried to take from her, the one he'd schemed to put under his name, was gone. Reclaimed. She rose from her chair, the faintest breeze lifting the corner of her scarf. Some debts settled themselves. Inside, the shredder still hummed faintly, cooling down from earlier. Maggie reached over and switched it off. The house fell into a peaceful silence. Outside, the foreclosure notice flashed on her phone screen, glowing in the dark like the final period at the end of a long sentence. She looked at it once more, smiled faintly, and whispered, "You finally lost what you never earned." Then she turned off the light. The porch light stayed on that night and every night after. It wasn't for her. It was for the kids who cut across the corner of Crestwood Lane on their way home from the park, the ones who'd started waving at her window when they passed. Maggie kept a small basket of granola bars by the door now. "You'll spoil them," Lacey teased once. "Good," Maggie said. "Someone should." By late spring, her porch had become a kind of stopover, a safe patch of light at the edge of dusk. The children never lingered long, but they always waved. The smallest boy called her Miss Maggs, and she never corrected him. It wasn't the peace she'd planned, but it was the peace she'd earned. On Sundays, her house filled with a different kind of laughter, the low, knowing voices of the widows from up and down the block. They gathered for tea at her kitchen table, 4 women who'd outlived husbands, hardship, and a world too eager to make them invisible. There was Nora from the yellow bungalow, who brought lemon bars that crumbled too easily but no one minded. Janice from across the park, always overdressed and unashamed of it. And Ruth, who never said much until she'd had her second cup. Maggie poured the tea, the sound of it soft and familiar. The conversation wandered easily, from grocery prices to grandkids to how they each managed the silence that came with being alone. "You're lucky," Ruth said one afternoon, watching the steam rise from her cup. "You found a way to stay yourself through all of it." Maggie smiled faintly. "Luck had very little to do with it." Nora chuckled. "Then maybe the rest of us should start writing laws too." Laughter rippled through the room, small but genuine. When the women left, Maggie stood at the doorway, watching them drift down the walk like a small parade of survivors. She didn't call after them. She didn't need to. A week later, she saw the moving truck. It was parked in front of Caleb's house, half empty already, cardboard boxes stacked neatly near the curb. No noise, no shouting, no signs of life beyond the dull thump of footsteps and the scrape of furniture. Melinda's car was gone for good. Caleb emerged carrying a lamp, his shoulders rounded under the weight. His hair was longer now, untidy, his shirt untucked. For the first time, he looked like what he had made himself. Small. Maggie stood on her porch, unseen behind the screen door, her mug warm in her hand. She didn't hide, but she didn't wave either. Caleb loaded the last box into the truck, glanced toward her house, and paused. For a moment it looked as if he might walk over. But he didn't. He only stood there, gaze flickering toward the house he'd lost and the one she'd made her own. Then he turned and got in the truck. The door shut with a hollow sound. Maggie watched as it pulled away, taillights glowing dull red against the gray street. When the turn signal blinked and disappeared at the corner, she whispered to herself, "And that's how you exit properly." 2 days later, Doug came by with a briefcase and a stack of papers. The spring light followed him through the door. "I've finalized the updates," he said. "Your trust is fully protected now. Tax shielded, revocable, airtight. No loopholes. Not even I can change it without your say." Maggie smiled. "That's how I like my piece. Papered and notarized." Doug laughed. "You know, I've had clients win millions who didn't sound this satisfied." "Maybe that's because they were still trying to buy freedom," she said. "I just secured mine." He nodded, tapping the folder. "And the name you wanted for the fund? It's done." Maggie ran her finger across the cover page. Lorne Lives On Foundation. She read the mission statement Doug had helped her write. To support community centers and elder advocacy programs that protect independence, education, and dignity for all. She exhaled softly. "That'll do." Doug glanced around the room. The framed scholarship letter, the fresh flowers on the table, the hum of quiet contentment that seemed to fill the space. You've built something solid here, Maggie. Not everyone gets to end their story this way. She smiled. Who said I'm ending it? Doug raised an eyebrow. Then what's next? She looked toward the window, where the evening light spilled across the porch, soft and gold. Something small, she said. Something lasting. That night she stood on the porch again, a sweater around her shoulders. The street was empty, the air clean after a brief rain. She looked toward the dark house 2 doors down, the one that had once been Caleb's, and felt nothing but stillness. She turned her gaze back to her own front yard, where the porch light glowed steady, catching the outline of a few neighborhood kids playing late, laughing in the drizzle. Her phone buzzed, an alert from Doug. Trust registered. Fund public. Congratulations. Maggie smiled to herself, tucking the phone into her pocket. Lauren lives on, she murmured, in the ways that matter. A breeze stirred the chimes above her head, gentle and sure. The light cast long, soft halos across the walkway. She took a slow sip of tea, the night wrapping around her like a well-earned exhale. And in that quiet, somewhere deep beneath the hum of the porch light, she could almost hear her husband's voice, steady, proud, unhurried. You did it, Mags. Her smile deepened. We did, she whispered back. The for sale sign went up one quiet Monday morning, planted in the patch of lawn between Maggie's cottage and the house Caleb once called his own. The place had been empty for months, shutters drawn, paint fading under the drizzle. Most of the neighborhood barely noticed it anymore. Maggie did. By noon, she'd already called Doug. Make the offer anonymously, she said. Doug paused. Anonymous? I don't want them thinking I'm collecting trophies, she said, just tying up loose ends. Doug exhaled with a smile she could hear through the phone. Consider it done, Miss Lorne. Silent buyer, cash close. It took less than a week. The property transferred quietly to an LLC, Lorne Holdings, registered through Doug's office. The neighbors never asked questions. The street was used to Maggie doing things neatly and without fuss. Spring turned to summer as the renovations began. Contractors came and went, trucks parked under the same pine that used to shade Caleb's car. Maggie kept her distance at first, watching from her porch with her tea and the satisfaction of progress humming low in her chest. The noise didn't bother her. It sounded like transformation. Within a month, the tired little house began to change. The front door was painted robin's egg blue. The yard, once overgrown and dull, bloomed into orderly beds of lavender and sage. A small wooden sign went up by the walkway, unassuming yet proud. The Lorne Exchange. Books, bench, and quiet company. Inside, the walls were knocked down to create one open space. Shelves lined with donated books filled the corners. The smell of cedar and paper filled the air. Out front, 2 benches faced each other beneath a trellis of climbing roses. Lacey dropped by during one of the final paint touch-ups, wearing her realtor's grin. You've outdone yourself, Mags. What made you think of a book exchange? Maggie handed her a screwdriver, amused. Because stories don't expire when people do. They just need new shelves. Lacey laughed. You going to tell anyone it's yours? Maggie smiled faintly. They'll figure it out when they need to. The grand opening landed on a bright Saturday morning in August. The air smelled of grass and lemon pastries from the bakery that had donated treats for the event. Neighbors came in clusters, curious and smiling. Children ran up to the shelves, trading paperbacks with careful seriousness. The widows from Sunday Tea brought folding chairs and clapped when Maggie cut the blue ribbon. A local reporter from the Salem Chronicle, the same paper that once ran the story of Caleb's failed guardianship, snapped photos and asked for a quote. Maggie gestured to the sign above the door, the sunlight catching the gold lettering of the dedication beneath it. for the women who stay sharp. That's all I want to say, she told him. It was enough. The next morning, the headline read, Salem Woman Turns Vacant House into Haven for Readers and Resilience. Doug called after seeing it. You've officially built your empire of peace, he said. Hardly, Maggie replied. It's just a small corner where nobody can rewrite anyone else's story. That evening, after the last guests left, Maggie locked the front gate and walked the few steps down the sidewalk toward her cottage. The air was soft, a little cool, the scent of lavender following her. She slowed as she passed the darkened shell of Caleb's old house, now bank-owned, windows empty, porch bare. A foreclosure notice still clung to the door, weathered and curling. She stopped for just a moment, the wind lifting the edge of her scarf, her reflection glimmering faintly in the dark window pane. Not pity, not victory, just stillness. Almost poetic, she murmured. You tried to own my life, and lost yours to interest. The breeze carried her words away like they didn't need to linger. When she reached her porch, a small bouquet waited on the step. Yellow roses, wrapped neatly in brown paper. A card was tucked into the ribbon. Still the best account I've ever protected. Tina. Maggie smiled, setting the flowers gently in a vase by the door. She sank into her porch chair, the last rays of sun slipping behind the trees. Across the street, the little bookhouse glowed softly from the inside, light spilling through its open windows. Two teenagers sat on the new benches, laughing quietly as they flipped through a dog-eared mystery novel. Doug's voice echoed in her memory. You've built something solid. No, she thought, watching the faint light stretch across the street. It wasn't just solid. It was alive. She lifted her cup of tea, the steam curling in the golden dusk, and whispered, half to herself, half to the wind. He said I wasn't fit, so I cashed out, moved next door, and proved I never left. The porch light blinked on, steady as ever, and the camera above the door captured the scene exactly as it was. A woman at peace, holding her ground, the world still turning quietly around her.